Las Vegas, the city of pleasure and the gambling capital of America, contains the largest casinos in the world. These casinos have only one goal: to amass wealth from people by any means possible. Countless lives have been ruined in this city. All these casinos have sophisticated monitoring and security systems, sometimes even surpassing those of governments and banks. All these systems have one purpose: to prevent cheating and ensure the casino achieves the highest possible profits. But one man will challenge this entire city and manage to breach all the systems and security procedures implemented by the casinos, becoming the biggest fraudster in the gambling world. Our story today is about gambling. And of course, the gambling industry in the world is one of the fields most associated with pure evil, absolute evil, because the casinos and their owners have one goal in life: how to accumulate the largest amount of money at the expense of destroying people's lives. This is the person we'll get to know in today's story, Eric Morikawa, an American of Japanese descent. In 2000, Morikawa moved to Las Vegas. He moved to Las Vegas to work in construction because he was already a builder, and hotels, casinos, and tourist attractions in Las Vegas were expanding and being built at a rapid pace. One day, after a long day at work, Morikawa went to a game hall to relax and play billiards. There, he met a man named Jeremy Lewis. The two started chatting, and Morikawa learned that Jeremy was looking for work, but his past and criminal record were a deterrent. Any employer could look into his background and immediately discover his criminal record, which included drug and forgery charges. He had even been arrested multiple times before, so employers refused to hire him, even for difficult and low-paying jobs. Morikawa, of course. He owned this small contracting company and sensed that Jeremy had a drive to work, so he thought it might benefit him or help him. And indeed, Jeremy worked as a laborer at Morikawa's company. Everything was going from good to better. Until 2004, everything changed. The construction and real estate sector in Las Vegas was hit hard. One day, Morikawa was driving home from work with Jeremy when they saw a billboard for one of the Las Vegas casinos. The billboard read, "Are you ready to win a huge amount?" They call it chips, and it's the currency they use in casinos. So, when a person enters the casino, they exchange their money for these chips, and then they go and gamble and play the casino games with the chips. When they're done, whether they win or lose, any chips remain. He has it. Before he leaves the casino, he's supposed to exchange it again for real cash. Of course, these chips are manufactured by private companies, and their manufacturing process is secret. No one should know about it or see it except the people who work with them. So when our friend Morikawa saw this billboard with the big chip on it, he looked at his friend Jeremy and said to him, "Do you think manufacturing a chip like the casino chips would be difficult?" Jeremy thought for a bit and said to him, "I don't think it would be difficult. It's just a piece of plastic with some colors and a number on it. What are you thinking? Do you have any ideas?" "So, you mean you want us to try making chips like the ones they use in casinos?" Morikawa said, "These casinos and their owners are all evil and thieves." His friend Jeremy immediately encouraged him. So the first thing they did was go to more than one casino and buy different chips of different colors from different casinos in order to examine them and examine their characteristics. So Morikawa and his friend Jeremy took these chips to their workshop. Their workshop was in a garage. They went to Morikawa's house and started examining them. They even forcibly opened some of them to see inside and try to analyze the materials used to make these chips, and attempted to create their special chips for machines are cheap, of course, because the chips they make are similar to real ones. They have to adjust the weight and feel in the hand. Chips have a specific feel. It's neither rough nor smooth. So outwardly, it was an excellent imitation. But there was one problem, which is the sound the chip makes. When you throw a real chip on the ground, it makes a plastic sound, as if it's hollow inside. As for the fake chip they made, it made a heavy sound, like a pebble. The difference between the two sounds was clear, even though the weight and feel in the hand were accurate, according to them. This was a huge. After Morikawa failed to make counterfeit copies of these chips, he had a different idea. Why not take the $1 chip and convert it to the $100 chip? Both chips were made of the same materials, had the same weight, the same feel, the same shape, and everything else was the same. The only difference was the color and the number printed on them. So he thought it would be easier to change the number and the color instead of making a whole chip from scratch. The first step is to remove the number written on the chip, which is the circle in the middle that says $1. This circle was made of shiny plastic paper glued to the chip. So, to remove this circle, they found that the best way was to put the chip in boiling water. Over time, the circle in the middle would lose its stickiness without the chip bending. In this way, they were able to remove the number written on the chip. The next step was to imitate the colors that were on the $100 chip. So, they got paints in different colors from art supply stores and mixed these colors together to achieve a shade close to the color on the chip. This process wasn't easy and took a large number of attempts and experiments. They dyed the $1 chip completely gray, and to make sure that this color matched the original, they put it under different lights. Under house lights, under sunlight, and under a flashlight. The color and shine had to match, and even the thickness of the paint had to be thin so that the paint wouldn't create an extra layer and clump on top of the chip. So they used a spray paint and were actually able to achieve an excellent result. After they achieved the basic color, which is gray, the second step was to imitate the lines drawn on the sides. The easiest way was to cover the areas they didn't want to be dyed with tape or masking tape and spray the paint on the rest of the chip. When they removed the tape, the result was very similar to the chip, $100. Of course, no imitation is 100% perfect. So after that, they adjusted the colors, and now they're replicating the inner circle that has the $100 chip's value printed on it. This was the easiest step in the whole process. They used a scanner to take a picture of the chip and uploaded the design to the computer. Then, they simply printed the design. Of course, they didn't print it on regular paper. They printed it on glossy plastic paper so it would match the original circle. It was even slightly thicker than regular paper. They used a thin layer of glue to stick the circle to the chip. These chips had an extra protective layer. When you put them under ultraviolet light, you'll see a glowing dot in the center. So Morikawa went and got a pen with the same type of ink, and with that, the imitation process was complete. They made 3 fake $100 chips. They decided to go to this casino called Green Ranch and test if these chips they made would actually fool the casino employees. The criminal was ready. He took the task and played his part, so he took the 3 fake chips and entered the casino. He went straight to the cashiers who exchanged cash for chips and confidently handed them the 3 chips. The cashier quickly checked the chips and gave him $300. Meanwhile, Morikawa was waiting for Jeremy in the car, on edge and nervous. Suddenly, Jeremy opened the car door forcefully. They headed down the street and felt they were far enough away that no one was behind them. Morikawa, who was still nervous, turned to Jeremy and asked him what happened. He saw Jeremy holding $300 in his hand and smiling. He quickly understood the situation and smiled back. They immediately returned to their workshop in Morikawa's garage and started making more chips. Each of them could make a new chip in just 10 minutes. They couldn't keep targeting the same casino, or they would arouse suspicion. And of course, the chips differed from one casino to another. They were all similar in size, weight, and materials. The ones it's made from, but the colors are different. So, Morikawa and his friend Jeremy brought all the possible paints and dyes and kept mixing the colors and repeating the experiments until they got the colors of these chips right. They managed to counterfeit chips belonging to 8 of the biggest casinos in Las Vegas. No well-known casino in Las Vegas escaped them. This diversification was, of course, necessary to avoid raising suspicion, but even diversifying between casinos wasn't enough. If they kept spending these counterfeit chips and exchanging them for cash without playing gambling games in the casino, sooner or later the casinos and employees would notice. So they started winning and losing through these games. This way, when they went to spend the chips and exchange them for money, they wouldn't raise suspicion. And for your information, casinos are full of surveillance cameras. And there are entire teams whose job is to monitor these cameras and the players to make sure there's no cheating. Of course, these casinos have to ensure they're the winners in the end. Some players might win a little, but the casino always has to win. They don't cheat directly, but these games are designed and tailored specifically for the casino to win. And that's why gambling is all evil and ruins people's homes and destroys their lives. One of the clever moves they made was to go to a gaming table, for example, a blackjack or poker table or any of these games, And there, the employee or dealer standing at the table has a set of chips in front of them, and players can buy chips directly from them. Anyway, Morikawa and Jeremy would buy chips directly from the dealer, play for a while, then take their chips and leave the casino for the parking lot and their car. There, away from the casino cameras and security, they would swap the real chips they bought from the table for fake ones they had made themselves. Then they would go back to the casino cashier. They would exchange the counterfeit chips for money. If they were caught for any reason, they could simply point to the counter where they bought the chips and say, "We bought the chips from that counter." This was a clever tactic to ensure that even if they were caught, they wouldn't be held accountable. This money kept flowing into their pockets, and their wealth grew more and more. The shift in lifestyle begins. Life becomes more luxurious, and one begins to indulge in material desires. Morikawa was married, and his wife immediately noticed the sudden change in their financial situation. Her husband started taking her and their daughters to upscale restaurants, buying her whatever clothes she wanted, anything she desired. They no longer suffered from debt or paying household bills. So how did things suddenly change like this? His wife started asking him, "Where did you get this money?" But Morikawa kept dodging the question, telling her, "We got clients at work and secured construction contracts for respectable sums." But she became one of the biggest beneficiaries of their newfound wealth. She started buying the most luxurious brands, bags, and shoes. Over time, she stopped pressing for the source of his fortune and simply went along with it. Things continued like this for 3 months. Morikawa was manufacturing counterfeit chips while he and his family enjoyed their newfound wealth. But on the other hand, his friend Jeremy took things to a different level. He would rent luxurious hotel suites, some the size of a house, for example. A well-known hotel in Las Vegas called Riviera. Imagine, he used to rent the largest suite in this hotel for $1,000 a night. And of course, in 2005, $1,000 was worth more than it is today. Jeremy would indulge his desires in these hotels, bringing drugs, alcohol, and women. He spent all his time partying, gambling, and even Morikawa, whenever he saw him, noticed his eyes were red and dark around them because he didn't sleep and was constantly using and drinking. One day, while they were working on making some counterfeit chips, Morikawa overheard Jeremy speaking loudly on the phone. It sounded like he was arguing. It was clear from the way Jeremy spoke that he was talking to a girl or woman on the other end. And it was obvious that their argument was about money because Jeremy was telling her that he had given her even more than she deserved, and that she had no right to ask for more. Morikawa sat listening, bewildered by the conversation. Jeremy, who was on the phone, turned to him, put the phone down and said, "I'm in trouble." Morikawa asked, "What's wrong?" Jeremy replied, "I met this girl, and now she's threatening to tell the police if I don't give her money." Morikawa was even more surprised and asked sharply, "What do you mean she's going to tell? What does she know about us?" Jeremy lowered his head like a little kid who'd done something wrong and said, "I wanted to get closer to her, so I told her what we were doing. I thought she'd like me more when I told her, but now she's turned on me and is demanding money." Morikawa himself didn't know what to do, so he told Jeremy, "Give me the phone." She confirmed to Morikawa on the phone that she knew everything. She told him, "I know what you're doing. If you want me to keep quiet and not expose you, how much did they pay me?" This woman was blackmailing them because of Jeremy's stupidity. And indeed, after a few days, she came back again, blackmailing them and demanding an even bigger amount. Again, Morikawa had no choice but to pay her. But this time, Morikawa made it clear that this was the last amount they would pay her, and no matter how much she threatened them, they wouldn't give her anything more. One day, specifically on April 1st, 2005, Morikawa heard a knock on his door. He got up to open it, and a man in a suit stood there. The man said to Morikawa, "Excuse me for disturbing you, but my son was playing with his friends, and it seems they threw a ball into your backyard." Morikawa replied, "Just a moment. I'll go get it and be right back." As Morikawa turned his back to the man followed him inside the house, grabbed his hands, and arrested him. These were executive agents from a government agency called the Gaming Control Board. So what happened was that the woman who was blackmailing them didn't like the way Morikawa used with her when he told her that this was the last payment they would give her. She went and reported them. After she reported them, this government agency, which is the Gaming Control Board, opened an investigation into the case. Through the cameras in the casinos, they were able to track Morikawa and his friend Jeremy's movements and were able to seize some counterfeit chips. They searched the house and the workshop where they worked, and indeed, they found all the evidence confirming the matter. It was clear they were carrying out a massive counterfeiting operation. Government agents were shocked by the scale of the operation. The tools, machinery, paints, dyes, even the computers and printers, the papers and materials they had. Morikawa and Jeremy were taken into custody, and 3 days later they appeared before a judge. Imagine, the judge set their bail at $5 million. Of course, Morikawa and Jeremy didn't have $5 million to pay as bail, so they both went to prison. They were even put in a maximum security prison where the guards treat them like dangerous criminals. Imagine, even in this place where the most hardened criminals are held, this casino bail issue led the prisoners to introduce them to another prisoner whose bail was higher than theirs. They told them, "You see this guy? His bail is higher than yours." And that's how Morikawa met this prisoner with the higher bail. This prisoner was Russian and had connections with some dangerous Russian gangs, which is why his bail was so high. Morikawa wasn't used to associating with this type of person, but he found himself in this place. So he started chatting with this Russian prisoner, and during their conversations, he told a story about how they counterfeited chips and stole from the casino. The Russian gangster was impressed by the story. He liked the idea. He felt like Morikawa had struck gold, so he became interested and kept talking to Morikawa. He said to him, "Brother, I'm interested in doing business with you. I feel like you're a smart and understanding person. What do you think about us getting out of here and sitting down together to talk about business and explore opportunities and ideas we can pursue together?" Morikawa was a little surprised by the request. He wasn't the type of person who would think he could get involved in business with gangs and real gangsters. Several days passed, and Morikawa and Jeremy were still in jail. Morikawa managed to hire a strong lawyer. This lawyer was able to appeal the bail and reduce the amount from $5 million to $12,000. So he was able to pay the $12,000 and get out. On bail, but unfortunately, because his friend Jeremy had a criminal record, and there was even an outstanding arrest warrant against him in a different state, California, his bail wasn't reduced, and he had to stay in jail. Morikawa was released from jail, but of course, he's now awaiting trial in this case, and the trial could last for months, or even a year or more. The problem he'll face now is that his source of income has been cut off. All his expenses and his family's expenses depended on the money he made from forgery. Also, now he has additional expenses, which are the lawyer's fees. So once again, Morikawa found himself in dire financial straits, and debts and bills started piling up. He saw no other option but to try and contact the Russian gangster he'd met in prison. The Russian had also been released during this period, so, as requested, they met and started discussing business and potential collaboration opportunities. The Russian asked Morikawa to teach him how to manufacture these counterfeit chips. In the end, he and the Russian reached an agreement. Morikawa was going to teach and train the Russian and his men how to make counterfeit chips. They were the ones running the whole operation. Morikawa began training the Russians on the counterfeiting process. Sometimes he would train them in his garage. He always tried to be cautious in his movements, so that when he went to meet them, he would take circuitous or side roads. He was always careful to watch out for anyone behind him. The gang members started their operation and began counterfeiting chips in the way Morikawa had taught them. But the problem was that the Russians weren't as professional as Morikawa. The quality of the counterfeit chips they made wasn't up to par. During their rounds in the casinos, one of the casino employees noticed some of these counterfeit chips. When he placed the chips in the row in front of him with the other chips, he noticed that they were different from the rest. So this employee reported the officials after closely examining the chips. The responsible security authorities were notified, and they informed the Gaming Control Board. The board sent its agents to investigate and try to track down those who used the counterfeit chips. The first thing they did was review the security camera footage and were able to identify several members of the Russian gang. They noticed that this operation was much larger and more sophisticated, meaning they immediately realized it was the work of organized gangs. They suspected that two people had the ability to forge chips of this caliber, Morikawa and Jeremy. Since Jeremy was in prison, Morikawa was the only one under suspicion. They were able to identify several members of the gang, so they formed surveillance teams whose mission was to track these gang members. They would monitor their movements until they discovered the source. They had to take down the entire gang at once, along with the mastermind. During the surveillance operation, the agents followed some gang members to Morikawa's house. They saw them enter his house because, as we mentioned, Morikawa sometimes trained the Russians in his garage workshop. He was still training them to improve their chip manufacturing skills. He didn't know that the operation had already been exposed. Of course, when the agents followed the gang members to Morikawa's house, they immediately knew who the mastermind behind this operation was. They decided to raid Morikawa's house and catch him and his gang members red-handed. At that moment, Morikawa was in the garage with his gang members. The agents surrounded the house from all sides to prevent any of them from escaping, and one of the agents approached the door. He banged on the door, shouting, "Authorities! Open the door!" The agent stormed the house. He was arrested for the second time and returned to prison just 8 months after his release. He thought his life was over, that he would receive a harsh sentence that would throw him in jail for years. And then the powerful lawyer who had been handling his case returned. This lawyer was shrewd and knew how to defend Morikawa in an amazing way. Charges were brought against him in court, but the sentence his lawyer managed to get him was 5 years of probation with community service. What helped reduce his sentence, besides the lawyer's skill, was that they couldn't prove the quantity of chips he forged. Imagine, the chips they were able to prove were only worth $36,000, even though he now says, after the case ended, that they made chips worth more than $1 million. They didn't find most of the chips he forged. He says he's repentant now and will never go back and try to do what he did again. He says it was easy money, but not worth risking one's life and the lives of one's family for. As for his friend Jeremy, he spent several years in prison due to previous cases, and Morikawa's story was like a slap in the face to casinos and the chip system they use as currency. After this case, all the big casinos added a small electronic chip called RFID to the chips they use. You can find these scanners at gaming tables and at the cashiers. These scanners instantly detect the electronic chips inside the chips and determine their value and number. This is how he makes fake chips. And that brings us to the end of our story. I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to join us so we can become even better. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video with new excitement.